Our next guest is Chris Burghes, the Chief Executive of the Royal Free Charity. The charity's been in existence since 2000. It aims to support patients and staff of the hospital, and in Chris's words, it aims to have a presence on every ward. Chris is coming along to talk to us about how his organisation raised £54 million in a capital appeal. Chris, thanks very much for joining us here at Fundraising TV. Congratulations on raising £54 million for your research centre. I understand you were hoping that the doors would be opening next week. Is that what's going to be happening?
Sadly not. When we started on this journey, I never thought that we'd have delays because of planning and local objections. I thought if we did anything, we would struggle with the fundraising. Instead, this project's now probably about 2 years behind where we were expected to be. Although we've raised the £54 million on time and on target, which for a charity that's never done any capital appeal fundraising realistically before, is quite an amazing achievement.
Fantastic. So the money's in the bank, and how have you kept donors in? Have you lost any donors?
So luckily we haven't lost one donor. We've worked extremely hard behind the scenes to make sure that no donors have left us, which is a bit of a challenge when you are constantly being taken through the courts, which we've had to do from some of our local objectors to the building. So it's a huge new medical facility for University College London to help look at the immunity and transplantation research of the body. And sadly, some of the people in Hampstead feel that perhaps it could be located elsewhere, which doesn't meet with medical science, and therefore have rejected the building. But our donors, through a lot of hard work on the charity's part and our partners' part, every single one is kept with us.
Over 2 years, that's amazing. What was your original time frame, Chris, for the appeal?
It was a 3.5-year appeal, so our plan was to fundraise for about 24 months and then probably a 18-month, 2-year build process. But we wanted about 90% of the bank before we started. We were more successful in the fundraising than we thought we would be, so the money came in, and by the time we were ready to start building with the contractors, we had all £54 million already done. But sadly then we got into some legal objections that have delayed the project, and during that course we've had to manage budgets, manage inflation, manage what's a very tight construction period as well, because construction inflation in London has been quite dramatic over the last few years. Manage our way through that and still come out at the other end in a successful situation. For the trustees, that's quite a difficult journey to take them on.
Have they kept their nerve?
They have fully. Many times I thought, well, this might be the time we don't, but I have to say my board, and I've got 8 trustees, have been utterly supportive. They've wanted this building to happen because they see the benefits to medical science, and that always overrides. You know, you meet some of the patients we need to help, and it's hard to say, let's not keep our nerve to make this happen.
So Chris, to raise the £54 million, you will have done the standard Kiss for Support, lots of events. Did you have to do different things to keep that body of donors on side for the 2 years?
We did. And the easiest way was actually just to be open and honest with the problems. I think sometimes you could actually try and make it sound like it's something it isn't. We found the most successful way is just be open and honest, and the type of donors you're dealing with are used to problems in the property world. Most of them would have significant property holdings, and they're used to problems occurring, and as long as you're open and honest all the way through, we found that means that they've kept aboard. I think if we went down a different route and tried to be very clever, it wouldn't have worked. So actually for us, and to keep all our partners aboard as well, actually open, honest, transparent communication, transparency about what is happening, transparency about the additional costs have been by far the best way to do things.
And did you meet the donors face to face throughout that 2-year period?
Yeah, we have. So where they've wanted to meet, yes, we have. What we didn't do was do formal, I suppose, events afterwards over the last 2 years. We've done a few, but nothing major. So it's been very much one-to-one, a lot of emails, a lot of telephone conversations, just to keep them informed. So every time there's been a milestone, positive or negative, we've told them what that is. So a very proactive communication style, rather than wait for them to hear about it or wait for them to hear about it in the press. We've tried to make sure they anticipate what's coming along. So if they ever read about it in the press, they've got the story before they've read what's in the newspaper. And we've found that's a way of offshooting a lot of the issues that could have arisen. And the proof's in the pudding that ultimately all our donors, some of whom have given millions, some of whom have given a few £100s, they've all kept aboard with this project, even though at times it felt like there was no end game going to happen. It was going to go on forever.
And how about working with your partners? How did you manage that through this period of difficulty?
Throughout the whole process, it's been interesting working with partners. So we work with 2 other partners, and most capital appeals don't have to do that. So we work at University College London, and we work with the Royal Free Trust, the actual hospital itself. The trust owned the land we're building on, and the university is the biggest user of the centre. So we've had to make sure we have proper governance in place, that we kept everyone informed in that governance. And obviously as people change, because this project's been going on for 5 years now, so there is staff turnover as well. We've had to make sure that everyone's brought up to speed and aware of the issues that have arisen. That's been a long process, so I would say I spend a lot of my job communicating, and most of it is, it's the old 80-20 rule. 20% doing these days and 80% just communicating. I make sure I go to various events. I make sure I'm at all the sort of informal events of the Trust and UCL, just showing your face, quick, because sometimes it's just the little words help, rather than just stick to the pure governance of a meeting, a committee. I've made sure I spent as much time outside committees as inside, talking to people about the project.
Is there an inbuilt tension, because presumably UCL, they have their own fundraisers as you have yours? How have you kept that on track?
Yeah, this was a joint fundraising effort between the 2 partners of University College London, who are used to raising money in this field, and the Royal Free Charity, which had really never done anything like this before. So we made sure we had a memorandum of understanding between both organisations that set out how fundraising will work within the organisation, who is responsible, and what would happen if there were disputes. So we had a dispute resolution built into the memorandum of understanding in case it ever arose. I found that on things like trust funds and corporates, it was actually quite easy to work with UCL. It was actually quite logical. So a trust fund has a certain criteria of what they'd expect and what they would give out. So we were able to divvy up the cake, in essence, of who applied and who was the best to make the ask. Quite easy with UCL. I found them very open in that regard. I think where we both struggled more was about key donors, because we all want to take credit for a key donor, me more than anyone else. So, so that bit we found more challenging to split up. But actually, I suppose we've raised the money, and we've enjoyed working with them.
Great, it's worked, as you say, proof of the pudding. Could you talk a little bit about the governance, given the parties that were involved? Did you set up a project board, and who led that?
Yeah, so we have a project board in place between the 3 parties. And behind that we also have various committees. So we have a committee over the building itself, with a committee over the science that's going to go in the building, one about PR and comms. So there's a variety of committees that sit underneath the main programme board. That has people like myself, the chief executives, and other chief executives on it, the key decision makers within it. I also have to relate that back to the charity, because ultimately this building will be built and owned by the Royal Free Charity, and therefore it's the authority of the trustees of the charity to maintain within that, and they can't all sit on the programme board, and neither would that be a good use of their time. So I have several different governance structures that I have to report into to make sure the project stays as much as possible on track and on budget, excluding sort of the legal problems we faced.
Over the last 5 years, what would you say are the main lessons you've learned, and for the folks watching this, advice you would give if you're about to plan a capital appeal?
Firstly, I found get your trustees aboard on it. So I did a lot of work behind the scenes before I took it to the board. So there wasn't a big appetite among the trustees of the Royal Free Charity for this project originally, I felt, because they tried to do some capital appeals with the hospital before and none of them got off the ground. So they'd had their fingers burnt a little bit. So they were a bit wary about going into another one, which I would have been exactly the same. So I did a lot of work before it, and that meant working with outside agencies over checking the donors, making sure the business case, the case of support added up, but also, just as importantly, that the fundraising market added up. So I used an external consultancy, IFC, to come in and do some prospecting for us to make sure that we could generate the types of money we required to do this. To go from ask and nothing to 54 million for a medium-sized charity is actually a bit of an ask. And then I related it also back to the costs of doing it and made sure the trustees were aware. So we all think it's great to go and raise millions of pounds, but actually that's a difficult ask. There aren't that many capital appeal fundraisers around in the UK, and those are already running successful capital appeals. So it was actually quite difficult to get the staff resource in place as well. And then thirdly, I made sure that I spent an awful lot of time communicating. So as the chief executive, I took on that function And actually communicating is probably the one thing I've learnt more than anything else in this capital appeal. You can get all the architects in that you want, and we've got some very famous architects designing this building, and we have a wonderful design building, everything else. But actually, as problems arose, which they did, making sure your partners and your donors were aboard was, I think, a reflection more of the communication than anything else that we put in place.
Last question, did you have any big names from the medical world or celebrities, perish the thought, who helped with the appeal? Were you reliant on them in any way?
We've done, they've been involved. I mean, I remember the big comedy gig, and we had Rowan Atkinson, Harry Enfield, we had all the names doing comedy nights for us, Graham Norton, etc. So we've done that side of it. We've done receptions at the Palace, we've done receptions, private dinners at the Palace, we've done stuff at the House of Lords. We've done all the traditional sort of fundraising methods to raise the money. And if you kept to that and a strong case of support, we found the money came in. That wasn't our main problem, which with hindsight seems strange, because normally when you enter these things, it's a fundraising that gives you the fear, raising the ask and raising the money in the timeline. If you have a good, strong case of support, then it's just actually about confidence. And also it's about me as the chief executive being the front man, the salesperson, and not digressing that elsewhere down the stream. You have to accept, as the chief executive, it's your responsibility, and it's up to you to raise the money. And if you start on that basis, then it tends to work quite well.
Chris, how are you coping at the Royal Free Charity given the uncertain economic times in which we live and the heightened regulation for fundraisers?
It's definitely a challenge the last year has been, and I think for the next 3 to 4 years it's going to be increasingly so. I think over the last 12 months we've slightly changed our fundraising strategy. So we've previously over the last couple of years had massive growth. We've gone from 4 million to 16 million pounds income in the space of 5 years. And now we've just taken a pause to say some of those income streams that have actually given us the money in the past, and you think of direct mail here, telephone marketing, etc. We're almost exiting those markets now and starting to look at more social investment type models and commercial services. So we felt that some of the traditional fundraising methods, with all, as you say, firstly all the regulation around it, but secondly we've got rising inflation. We know that the pound in people's pockets is getting tighter, that being in those markets is going to be very challenging, and therefore probably not the best use of our charity's money to start to target them. So we do some work already around events and all that. We will continue with all that, those income streams, but I think our future growth will come from areas around more commercial service and more social investment.
And do you have any examples of those commercial investments? What kind of thing are you looking at?
So we've gone into retail shops now. I think there was huge growth after 2008 into retail shops, and a lot of charities did them. The last 24 months have been a bit of a pause and a bit of a tightening of margins in that area. But I think over the next 3 to 4 years, that could be another big stream for us in terms of income. So we're about to open our first one next week, actually. We've already got the builders in 2 more, and our goal is to roll out 20 over the next 2 to 3 years, depending on where we get to. Some of the other income streams I think could be tight. I think certainly we found that legacies, which traditionally has been quite a good growth area for us, with all the pressures on people to give money to their children to get on the housing ladder, never mind the social care element that we know came in the election, means that perhaps legacies won't be quite the strong area it used to be. And we certainly think that things like the general fundraising in terms of direct mail are pretty much time to take a pause, because not only have we got fundraising regulation as an NHS charity, but we also have the issue around patient data. So I think things like social investment, where we are going into much more things like key worker accommodation. So we are taking money, we are buying accommodation blocks and then letting that to nurses, doctors, etc. Helps us in several fashions. We know in North London that only 35% of nurses own home, 65% rent, and therefore actually having some affordable housing for them, it will be very beneficial in terms of providing better quality nursing care, which is our remit in the hospital, but also long-term income for the charity.
And tell me about this gym.
And we also, as part of our health and fitness period, we also now run our own fitness centre. So not only have we got a gym, we've got fitness rooms, we've got studios, we've got a swim pool, we've got sports halls. Again, a major income stream for the charity, but also means 1,000 people a week from the local community are getting fit, which for an NHS charity, in trying to offset against health and well-being, it actually ticks several boxes. And I think those types of areas are going to be long-term income streams for charities. I think the traditional model is changing.
I think that's an excellent note to end on. Chris, thank you very much indeed.